Welcome to our Weed Biology module.
This module was authored by Christine Moncada, Jeff Gonsolis, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer of the University of Minnesota in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
In this module, we will cover several aspects of weed biology. You may wonder why this is important to understand, but their biology can guide us in choosing the best tools to manage them. Most organic farmers say that weeds are one of their significant challenges. Because weeds compete with crops for nutrients, light, and moisture, they have negative effects on crop yield. Weed effects can go beyond yield reduction to interfering with harvest, such as bindweed vines that can get wrapped up in equipment, or by reducing quality, such as nightshade berries that stain soybeans. Even small populations of weeds can affect yield. Therefore, in most cases, weed control is necessary. This table shows the percentage of yield loss that might be expected due to one weed per square foot of different weed species. As you can see, when there is one especially competitive weed plant per square foot in a corn or soybean field, there can be significant yield loss. In this section, we will cover the different life cycles of weeds. Weeds, just like every plant, can be categorized by their life cycle. An annual grows from seed, grows vegetatively, sets seed, and dies in 1 year. A biennial is similar, but the process occurs over 2 years. A perennial can live for many years. In temperate climates such as ours, a perennial will go dormant in the winter and come back to grow again the next spring. An annual completes its life cycle, germination, vegetative growth, flowering, seed set, and death, in 1 year. Annual weeds are very successful in most cropping systems. Because most crops are also annuals, annual weeds easily adapt to these cropping systems. Annual weeds produce large amounts of seed to grow the following year. Examples that most field crop farmers would be familiar with are velvet leaf, pigweeds, water hemp, lamb's quarters, and foxtails. Another type of life cycle that falls under the annual category is winter annual. Generally, annuals complete their life cycles in 1 season. In other words, they germinate in the spring and set seed and die by the fall. A winter annual is similar, but it germinates in the fall and sets seed and dies in the spring. Winter annuals can be common in no-till and in winter annual crops such as winter wheat and winter barley. Examples are horsetails and wild mustard. Biennial weeds take 2 years to complete their life cycle. The first year's growth is vegetative, with the plant producing a rosette. In the second year, the plant produces flowers and sets seed. It dies by the end of the second year. Examples are musk thistle and mullein. Biennial weeds tend not to be very significant in field crop systems, but are more common in pastures. A perennial lives longer than 2 years. A perennial is different from annuals and biennials in that it can replicate itself not just through seeds, but also vegetatively through specialized structures. Canada thistle, quackgrass, and dandelion are examples that can be particularly troublesome in perennial crops such as alfalfa. In our next section, we will discuss the ways weeds can produce offspring. There can be more than one way depending on the species. One of the reasons that weeds are successfully competitive is that most of them produce a lot of seed, as shown on this table. A single red root pigweed plant can produce over 100,000 seeds. But even yellow foxtail, with 6,500 seeds per plant, is impressively productive. Most of the seeds that weeds produce are retained in the soil, where they can build up to an incredible level. The weed seed bank is comprised of the viable weed seeds in the soil. As shown in this table, there are millions of weed seeds per acre in the seed bank. Compare that to 34,000 seeds per acre, which is a typical corn planting rate in the upper Midwest. Seeds in the weed seed bank can remain viable there for years, depending on the species, until the conditions are right for germination. As this table shows, some weeds can stay in the soil for up to 40 years if the conditions are right. One obvious weed management strategy is to not allow weeds to go to seed in the first place. We will discuss more strategies in our weed management modules. As mentioned previously, perennials have other reproductive structures in addition to seeds. A significant structure for organic farming is the rhizome, which is a way that plants can reproduce vegetatively. Rhizomes are underground stems that are capable of generating roots and shoots. This means that a small piece of rhizome can generate an entirely new plant. One way to prevent the introduction of rhizomatous perennials is to be careful not to spread rhizomes from one field to another with your equipment. The last section in our module relates to when weeds emerge, which can vary considerably. The time that weed seed germinates in your field is an important factor for management. In a general sense, weed emergence depends on soil conditions such as soil temperature and soil moisture. Other management factors such as tillage can stimulate weed emergence. So emergence can vary from field by field because conditions can vary. Additionally, weed emergence varies significantly by weed species. However, there are general trends and times of weed emergence. By learning these, you can gather information to guide your weed management strategy. In this chart, we show some common times of emergence for weeds in Minnesota. For example, wild mustard generally emerges in April, velvet leaf in May, and water hemp in June. Targeting mechanical weed control operations to when problem weeds emerge is critical in their management. Not only do weeds start emerging at different times, the length of time they emerge varies by species. For instance, giant ragweed tends to complete its emergence over a shorter period than giant foxtail. In the case of weeds that have a long emergence time, mechanical weed control operations will likely need to be repeated. We have covered some of the basics of weed biology. Please view our modules on cultural and mechanical weed control to see how to apply these principles in practice.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.